I think we'll get started. It looks like the waiting room's starting to slow down. All right, so thank you everyone for joining us today for Fire Chat Friday. We'll be talking about Wildfire Pay Initiative updates. My name is Morgan Rubinow. I'm currently detailing as the social media lead for Jennifer Miss Livy. She will be back in as the facilitator for this starting for the May Fire Chat Friday. So you'll see her next month. So really quick, I just want to go over some basic housekeeping things. So first, if you need to put on closed captioning, please make sure that you press the button at the bottom with the CC on there and you can start your closed captioning. The session's being recorded. We'll make sure we share the recording next week once it's available. Please keep your cameras and microphones off while speakers are presenting. And we're going to have a Q&A session at the end, and you'll be able to ask questions then. You can raise your hand and we'll have you turn on your mic if you feel comfortable. You can also use the chat throughout the session here and just put your questions in the chat, and we'll make sure that we answer those during the Q&A as well. So now I'm going to pass it over to Grant Beebe, Assistant Director for BLM Fire and Aviation, to kick us off.
Excellent. Thanks, Morgan. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on a Friday. Sometimes these are a challenge, but we've called them Fire Chat Fridays, so we pretty much have to stick with Fridays. Otherwise, we got to change the name. There will be something like this coming up next month. May 10th, with all the DOI fire directors getting together to kind of do something along these same lines with the full DOI fire community. But we wanted to talk to you all now, just because we've had that president's budget out, the 24 president's budget out, and it contains what we hope will be some of the more permanent solutions to firefighter pay, benefits, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we just had an opportunity here to tell you what we know, and we want to do our speaking briefly so that you can ask questions that are on your mind. Let me just hit a couple things, and we've got great folks on the line who can talk in more detail, especially budget and HR, because a lot of the stuff goes through there. But just generally, what's going on is the 24 budget has funding to do a more permanent fix to Wildland Firefighter pay, which we know has been an issue for many years. President Biden brought everybody up to a minimum of $15 an hour, and then the infrastructure law did what it did, which was the 20,000 or 50% of base pay to try to get people up to a more competitive wage and to honor the kind of commitment that firefighters have to the job, and the dangers of the job would be recognized in there as well. So we're all hopeful that a more permanent solution will get funded by Congress. Along with the funding that Congress has to give us to make it work is a legislative package of changes to, for instance, a change to the 456, the new firefighter series, and other fire employees base pay, and then on top of it, a proposal for portal to portal, and then what we call a pay cap, more nimble pay cap process for people who hit the maximum amount of money you can make. Let's just say that firefighter pay, as it has with the infrastructure law, has followed coverage, right? So if you're in a primary or secondary job, you might not even have primary or secondary coverage, but if you're in a job that's covered, the pay is coming to you. The permanent pay fix that's being proposed will follow those same lines. So what we know is that if you're in a covered job, you will be part of this pay coverage. The portal to portal piece that's included in this whole legislative proposal that accompanies the president's budget says that we're going to do a pay adjustment in your base pay, and then we're going to pay you more hours when you go off on fire assignment. Essentially, 15 and 9 is what's been proposed. So you would be paid 15 hours every day you're on a fire assignment, plus 9 hours of a standby rate, no matter what you're doing, sleeping, etc., eating. So that's in there, and the combination of those two things, the portal to portal, based on how many fire assignments people typically get, plus the pay adjustment would roughly equal the 50% or $20,000. I'll just say that right now that is the legislative proposal. We know we've heard a lot about it. We've seen it described. We've seen some pictures of it. It is still in the negotiation phase about, what's gonna go forward to Congress as a proposal to make all this stuff happen. And I'll tell you, there's the most detail I've seen on this myself personally, I saw yesterday on the grassroots page. So for those folks who are curious about what things exactly look like, if you haven't done it already, go to grassroots. And then there's a legislative tab under grassroots, and you can look in there, and it has the legislative proposal that's gone forward to OMB. What we know is that that's not final yet, that there's still some negotiations going on, and we're waiting for the department to kind of tell us what might be in the final package. Congress needs to act on that to make this stuff happen. So Congress needs to say, yep, we like that. We're going to put it in some kind of law that makes it happen. So that has to happen. And then the president's budget would fund it. Hopefully that's not too complicated, but this all needs to happen by the end of the fiscal year so that the kind of pay adjustments that have been happening can continue on without a break in the next fiscal year. So we're all super hopeful that would happen. Some other things that are going on, we are working hard with all of our friends in the Forest Service and OPM to get the appropriate dispatchers into the 456 series. So that would originally they were excluded from that. And a lot of good folks have made a lot of good arguments for why dispatchers should be part of 456. We think we're making progress there. That's ongoing work, but don't think that we haven't for 1 minute been making the case for that. And then what else do I want to say? Non-fire folks. So for the folks who are not in special fire coverage jobs, again, this year, the BLM has supported doing Star Awards for those folks to recognize the contribution to the fire program that they make. So that's in the works as well. I'm going to stop right there. Thanks for the opportunity to get it kicked off, Morgan. I'm going to go back to you.
Thank you, Grant. All right, we have quite a few people who are just joining, so want to make sure that your cameras and microphones are off. If you want to, you can change the view so that it's just speaker view instead of gallery view. It's kind of in the top right hand corner. That might make things easier depending on what view you might currently be in. And we're going to just have the speaker who's talking have our video on at times. So, and lastly, just want to remind everyone that you're more than welcome to put your questions in the chat throughout the entire event today. We're going to hold on answering them until the Q&A at the end. We'll have an opportunity for people who want to raise their hand and turn their mic on to be able to do that. And then we'll go into the ones that came in through chat. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this over to Ben, and he'll introduce himself and get started. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ben Sitz, FA 400 budget, and I am going to take just a quick, probably 5 minutes, a little review of bill and what you can expect going forward with the bill payments for the rest of the year. So as Grant already did a good job of reviewing, bill was passed last year with supplemental salary increase of $20,000 per year or 50% of your base pay. So we started those incentive payments pay period 15 of last year, and they've been continuing ever since, all the way up to through this pay period. So to date, 32,500 bill incentive payments made for a total of $48.3 million dollars in supplemental salary payments. Those payments are expected to continue through the end of the fiscal year, as Grant said. And then in a best case scenario, we'd have the legislation that he spoke to that Ken's going to speak to would pick up right as the bill payments end. So bill payments processed in an incentive payment of $766.40, or right about that every pay period, as long as you're as long as you're working. My request to everybody on this call, any supervisors, as well as to pass on to your employees, if if you're looking at your leave and earning statements, please look to see if you're getting paid more than that amount in your leave and earning statement. If you're getting paid more than $766, there is an issue with overpayment. And the best thing you can do if you see that on your leave and earning statement is to contact your HR point of contact. That's who can fix your overpayment. And it's almost always going to be due to when you have a wage within grade increase or you have a promotion. That change in grade or change in step prompts some actions that HR has to take to ensure that you're paid correctly. So I just reach out to your HR point of contact if you're seeing that, but you are the first line of defense to prevent overpayment and then probably subsequent debt collection on that payment. 32, I think I said 32,000 incentive payments. It's a lot of payments going out. There are issues that don't get caught. So with this scale of payments going out. So if you want to correct it as soon as possible, just pay attention to your leave and earning statement. The last thing would be catch-up payments. I say you should be getting paid $766.40. Many of you, almost all of you, are not getting paid that amount due to the nature of the action. So we have processed catch-up payments. That difference between, let's say you're getting paid $750 and you should be getting paid $766. We do a calculation to that $16 difference to pay you your catch-up payment. We've done one of those for pay period 15 through pay period 22 of last year. We will do another catch-up payment for everyone for pay period 23 through, I think it'll be pay period 10. We'll process those catch-up payments probably in pay period 11. So you're going to see another kind of a weird deposit that's going to come as an award, just like the last one, for a random amount. It's going to be different for every single employee. Could be $10, could be $350. But the intent of that is to fully pay those people who are supposed to get up to $20,000 their entire amount. So that's given the restrictions we're in, that's how we have to process them. So we'll do one in May, and then you can expect probably the final one right around September and October as we get close to the end of the fiscal year. So that's really all I have on bill. Incentives, vast majority of people are getting paid correctly and on time. If you have an issue, first bring it to your supervisor, reach out to your HR contact, and the sooner the better to correct those issues if you think you're being overpaid or in some cases underpaid. Yeah, that's all I have on bill. If there's any questions in the chat, I'll try and answer them. I'm going to turn it over to Cindy now.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cindy Pogue. I'm the Human Resources Officer here at the Fire and Aviation Directorate. Today, I'm going to share with you some information of where we're at with using and implementing the new Wildland Firefighter series within BLM. Over the course of the last several months, BLM classification, subject matter experts have been working with our DOI partners to develop the new standard position descriptions that are associated with this new series. Where we're at right now is that we have completed as standard position descriptions for the GS3 through the GS10 operational ones. So your basic wildland firefighter, those are done. We do have template PD, so they're not fully developed for GS11, 12, and 13s. Those are targeted to be used for FMOs and AFMOs out in the districts. All of these SPDs and templates have been uploaded into the National Operations Center's classification SPD library. So if you want to see them, the SPDs for the 3 through the 10, they're complete, but not quite ready to use yet, as there are several accompanying documents that need to be prepared and an implementation guide issued. So a little bit more on that in a minute. For the template SPDs for the FMO and AFMO positions, our office is close to finishing up a complexity analysis, which will be used to identify which templates our offices will use and to have the NOC branch of classification create a bureau SPD. There will be specific instructions issued for these once this piece has been completed. Pending the ability to use the new SPDs as they become issued, we will use the current PDs we have been using that are classified in the 450, 462 and the 401 series if you have vacant positions to fill. Our office is actively working on creating the implementation plan to begin using the new SPDs and hope to have that completed and out to you soon. Areas which we are working on finalizing in order to issue the implementation guidance are, how does IFPM work with these positions? That needs to be clarified. We're also developing some standardized job analyses. Of course, the complexity piece needs to be done as well. So we still have some work to do, but we're getting close. There are several SPDs that are in progress or targeted to be completed, which are in fuels, planning, aviation management, and prevention. Right now, as the new SPDs are issued, they are for recruitment purposes only. We are waiting further instructions on how we will proceed with moving current employees into the new PDs. We don't have that instructions yet, so can't really answer any of that. So basically not a whole lot. You probably knew a lot of that already, but at least now you're kind of caught up. I'll kind of turn this over to Ken Smid. He is here at the Fire and Aviation Directorate, who will provide you some information on the 2024 proposed pay increases. Ken?
All right. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody. Hopefully I'm on screen and you can see me. Morgan?
Yes, you are good.
Okay, thank you. Ken Schmid, Division Chief, Budget and Evaluation, and I'm just going to go over, what's going to happen with these pay incentives and kind of what the proposal is that Grant mentioned in a little more detail. So what's going to happen to the pay increases in fiscal year 24? We know the president's budget proposes significant reforms, as Grant mentioned, to increase the nation's investment in our workforce. We know the cornerstone of these reforms is a permanent increase in pay. These are also tied to legislative proposals, which were given to Congress at the end of March. And these were, a combined effort with OPM, USDA, and the Department of Interior. So what are these proposals? What are the proposals? Establish a special base rate salary table for wildland firefighters. Create a new premium pay category that provides additional compensation for hours when on incident, and establish a streamlined pay cap. It also does, the legislative proposals do also talk about work rest, ensuring that when firefighters or those responding to incidents, when they come off, they get appropriate rest. But it's kind of solidifying what we already do, but in legislative form. So, all right. So what does a special base rate salary table for wildland firefighters mean? Basically, it's going to be a sliding scale going from GS1 to GS15. I think someone asked, why does it start at a GS1 and a GS2? I think that's because all the government scales start that way, even though we don't hire till the GS3. So I think they've got to show the GS1 and 2, but understanding we hire at the GS3 level with that. So you can see how the sliding scale starts off at 36% for those that we hire at the GS3 level, and then drops 3% on down, even up to the GS14 and 15. Originally this was intended for the lower grades, 3 through 9, but in order to encourage people to keep moving up, to keep moving into position, you've got to continue to bump that up slightly as you go further up so that there's a pay increase as you move up into the different positions. And again, as I go through this, just keep in mind, these are legislative proposals. None of this is agreed to. Like Grant said, Congress has got to approve this, and there could be multiple changes before this actually becomes effective, or if it does become effective. So how does this, the special base rate salary table, you know, what does that mean for firefighters that we're getting the supplement, and how does this affect those individuals? Well, it's going to mean higher base pay, but also means higher overtime and higher hazard pay. It's also going to mean higher nighttime differential and higher Sunday premium. So all those get factored in those increases. And the other part we don't think about a whole lot is it's also going to mean a higher benefit, government matching 5% towards your TSP, and also is going to improve the high 3 of as folks get close to retirement. So if this goes through, it's really a great opportunity in Wildland Fire, and something we've been asking for years. So just want to show, you know, our rough estimates of what this looks like if this compensation goes through. And it's got a couple other parts to it I'll get to here in a second. If you look at like a GS3 seasonal employee, if they get 200 hours of overtime, the estimated increase in pay is going to be about 8,500. That's over what they get right now. And then if you look at the current supplement for a GS3 seasonal working 6 months, their supplement right now is 8,100. So a couple hundred hours overtime with that increase in pay, increase in hazard. I calculated that in there as well. And then also some of the premium pay I'll talk about. But anyways, it does equate to more. 400 hours, it equates to a lot more than that current supplement, which will go away at the end of the fiscal year. And you can see on you know, as we go down, GS5, similar. They've got to get more hours of overtime to surpass that supplement amount. GS7, very similar. 400 goes past it. Really, it's probably about 300. Gets close to that value of what the current supplement is. Again, career seasonal, in my estimates, we're using like an 18 and 8 type scenario. GS9, when we start getting into more permanent positions, it is more difficult to get above that current supplement with overtime, hazard, premium pay. But it is significant increases over what folks were receiving 2 years ago. So, you know, keep that in mind, plus the added TSP benefit, plus the added, you know, high 3 when you get down there as well. So like I said, that includes overtime, estimated H pay, estimated premium incident pay, and some extra benefits. So just rough estimates on those numbers. Second part of the legislative, what does create a new premium pay category that provides some additional compensation for all hours mean? So this is from the legislative proposal. It does apply to a wildfire severity assignment, and prescribed fire was also included. It's an employee who's deployed to the field and in continuous duty status. They're paid at a rate of 50% of the employee's hourly wage. And 9 hours, I think Grant mentioned that, for every 24-hour period. So it'd be a 15-hour regular day, 9 hours of this 50% pay rate. So what does that look like when we throw it out to the different grade levels? So I threw some examples in here, and I did this under a 14-day scenario. So if we look at like a GS9 who goes out on a fire assignment for 14 days, who's in these special pay tables, they'll get roughly $2,100. Non-fire, this is going to be also a great benefit to those that help support fire incidents, and those that aren't in a covered position are going to be also getting this premium pay. And you can see it's fairly significant increase over what you know, folks that are helping support us get in the other activities. The third part, what does establish a streamlined pay cap waiver mean? Well, it means, in short, basically the Secretary of Interior and the Secretary of Ag can work together to waive the cap and make it much easier than the current process. So hopefully this will be a regular occurring deal as we get into, you know, fairly busy and active fire seasons. Like I said, easy method of getting the pay cap waivers. So that's what we know. And those are all proposals. And all of this is dependent on what Congress does with two things. Really, it's the budget. Are we going to get the increases to potentially pay for some of this? And then the second part is, what is Congress going to do with the legislative proposals? And that's really the key part with this. So a ton of information there. And Morgan, I think what we might do is maybe just maybe have Ben pop up and just show a couple examples of what the proposals might mean. We've developed, or Ben's largely developed, a special pay calculator that kind of shows a little bit more of this, and then we can open up to questions after that.
Yeah, sounds good. Ben, if you want to hop on and share your screen and then just pass it back over to me once you're done.
I'm sure people have probably already came up with their own calculator, have already ran the numbers to see what a new pay scale potentially looks like. You know, when we saw the legislative proposal for the new pay scale, they listed out the percentages by grade. I just went through that and made a simple calculator. What it looks like if you are paid without the new pay scale, but you're getting the bill supplement, whether that's below 20,000 or the full 766.40. And then what it looks like when the supplement goes away, but let's apply just the new pay increase, and really just a base hour increase. You know, at a GS4 step one, regardless of anything, it's a $5.47 increase. Really, that's equivalent. If we think of this pay increase, I think GS3, I'm just going to go to a 3-step one. I think a GS3 step one is close to equivalent of what we think of as a GS7 right now. I think a GS5 in base pay right now will increase to what we currently think of as a GS9. So it isn't $20,000 a year. The lower you are on that pay scale, the closer, without any overtime, the closer you're going to be to 766, or in this case, 649. It's still not as much. It's $180 less. But this $585 increase per hour, you know, that compounds for all the additional pay, as Ken was saying. So your overtime rate goes up, your HAS rate goes up, any differential rates go up, not to mention the premium pay. But if we just disregard the premium pay in there, overall, at the 3-step one's looking at almost a $6 an hour increase. That does decrease the percentage increase decreases as you go up in GS. You know, it's not the same for everyone. This really focuses the majority of the pay increase, the lower levels, the further you go up in the GS scale, you're still seeing a bump. I mean, GS11 is still going to see a $4 an hour bump in pay, in base pay. But if we equate it back to that 766 bill supplement, it's not the same. There's 450-ish bucks a pay period decrease in just base. So I think we can probably share this at some point. We're kind of waiting on things to be solidified, but this is really just taking the available information that's out there, applying it. This is a basic RUS OPM pay table, doesn't include localities. My assumption is localities will apply to the new pay table just like they do current pay tables. So if you're in a higher locality, everything is just adjusted accordingly for that. But I thought this did a good job. If and when we share this, you know, you could add in if you had 10 hours overtime and what your difference is. And it's true that the higher you are, it's not going to equate to $20,000 for everyone. This, in my opinion, this new base rate just compounds on every hour you're going to make of overtime hazard, you know, your contribution to the government's contribution to TSP and your high 3, as opposed to the supplement, which none of that applied. Wasn't part of your base salary, considered for your high 3, did not impact the government's contribution to your TSP. I hope that was a little helpful. As you go up in grades, that compensation between your bill and the new pay table, it's going to get greater It's really focused at the lower levels. So
Thanks,
All right,
Grant.
thanks, Morgan. I appreciate it. There's a lot of good questions flying around in the chat. We could walk back to what Congress said in the bill. Congress said firefighters should be getting a pay supplement, and there was a lot of discussion. It took us, the royal we, the government, about 10 months to figure out what Congress meant by firefighters. And Forest Service and DOI decided that firefighters meant everybody in retirement coverage. So they didn't just look at arduous firefighters, which was the discussion at first, thinking that might meet congressional intent. They said, let's just consider fire folks to be everybody in special retirement coverage, including secondaries. And so they extended that benefit that was in the bill all the way up to GS 15s who are in fire coverage jobs. That was maybe generous, but that's the way it came out. And I'll say, as a permanent solution, they're not looking at the same benefit that came out in bill. They're doing something different. We were super gratified that they did extend it all through the fire organizations, because we know we have a hard time recruiting folks into management jobs, folks who don't necessarily go off on a lot of fire assignments, but who are contributing greatly to the fire program. And we also said, let's extend to everybody who's in fire entirely, but we didn't quite make that case. So you're absolutely right. It's not the same benefit that's in bill. It's dependent on some fire assignments. It's dependent on people going out and working overtime. And I think the assumption for the people who are doing the work, doing the math, was that people are going to go off on fire assignments. And let's distribute enough funds, both in the portal proposal and in the base rate, so that they don't have to go out as much. So they could make less overtime. But there is an assumption that the world's not going to change. People are still going to go off on fire assignments. And fair observation that if it's a really slow year and people aren't going out, there are no fires, then this doesn't work. It's dependent on some fire assignments, some overtime, and that's part of the calculation. And certainly it hasn't been a year lately where people aren't making a fair amount of overtime. And really the thought is that we could cap it somehow. Back to dispatch. So I said, the appropriate dispatchers, let's say this, what OPM is reconsidering is excluding the dispatch function from the 456, and they've agreed to take another look at it. They are departmental OHC, the Office of Human Capital, the HR folks at the departmental level are sponsoring a survey to go back to the dispatch world and get a better sense of what the duties are, and seeing if they can match those duties in the dispatch centers, the coordination centers, with the 456 requirements. So we're grateful that they're taking another look at it. So I'm probably getting ahead of myself here when I say we think dispatch will make it back into the 456 along with the other fire personnel. But I don't want to get ahead of that process. So they're going to go out with a poll and say, all right, tell me, survey and tell us what your job is. But we do need to recognize that right now we've got folks in dispatch centers whose jobs require them to have prior fire experience, and there are dispatch folks in the logistics side, especially who don't have that same requirement. We really don't know what's going to happen with the 456 and the dispatch centers, but we're happy that they're taking another look at it, and more to come on that. First question is, can we get dispatch into 456, and then who exactly is in there, and does that mean everybody in the center or not? That's a different question, so we'll get back to that. But we're gratified that first step is happening. And then one more time, I'll say this one more time: pay is following special firefighter retirement coverage, not the series. So you could be an aviator in a different series, you could be a training person in a different series, you could be a wage grade, not necessarily in the 456 series, potentially, right? You could be these other things and still be covered. You could opt to stay in your current PD, and as long as you've got coverage, then you're still going to be part of the pay supplement. So you don't have to be a 456 to earn the pay. Okay, now I'm going to shut up. Morgan, back to you.
Thank you, Grant. And I saw that there were some questions asking if Ben can share that Excel sheet. The answer is yes. We will send that out when we do a follow-up email after this with all of the various worksheets, et cetera, that people have referred to today. So I just want to say welcome to some people who were stuck in the waiting room because we had accidentally hit capacity for the Zoom meeting. So apologies for that. It's being looked into so we don't have that issue with other Fire Chat Fridays. This is being recorded, so For anyone who missed it today, or if you came in late, you'll be able to get that recording. We'll send that out as soon as we have it available, along with the Excel sheet and anything else from today. So we're gonna roll over into the Q&A session of this. So Cindy, Ben, and Ken, if you don't mind at least just having your camera on, I will read out. First, we'll get started with some of the questions that came in through the chat, and then I'll have people, if you want to raise your hand, you're welcome to, and I will call you out so you can turn on your camera. So first, one of the questions was, while I understand the different percent on the GS levels, why the disparity in payments among all the GS levels? For example, 10,000 for lower GS levels down to 3,000 for the highest. Why is it not all relatively the same amount?
I think some of it goes back to, what the original intent was. It was largely intended for, firefighters. So that lower grade, 3 through the 9, it wasn't, intended largely for the upper grades. And so I think it's working towards trying to meet that overall intent, would be my kind of assumption with that, of why it's higher at the lower grades and then less as you go on up. But the sliding pay does still allow for higher base pay, as you do move up. And there's a lot of discussion in here about, work-life balance, and you're going to have to get more overtime. I think like Grant said, the assumption is people are going to be getting overtime, and mixing that in overall, it's gonna, increase the pay that people were getting, and certainly over what they were getting 2 years ago, significant increase over that. So I don't know if I completely answered that. I don't know, Ben, you got anything else you want to throw with that?
No, I mean, it's a sliding scale, so that the higher grades are always, they're still getting paid more than the lower grades. It's a bigger it looks like a bigger increase, and it is a bigger increase. But if we stacked all those salaries up together, the 4 is getting made more than 3, the 5 more than the 4, the 10 more than the 9. So and I agree with Ken. The intent is to probably have the biggest impact at the lowest levels, probably that 3 through 7, 3 through 9, to bring those wages up. It looks dramatic, but everybody on that pay scale is still getting a pay increase.
All right, thank you both. So let's see, another question that came in was, how does the standby rate change with the initial attack response to fires in standby rate hours?
Yeah, the whole premium pay, which is a standby rate, there's still a lot of things that got to get figured out with that. And there's language in there. It says something about like the first 36 hours, or when like you would normally change your time to, like you would on an incident, is when it goes into that standby rate. So that's when it changes. Initial attack isn't necessarily considered for that, with the idea that people are going to work longer than 15 hours. They're going to probably work, far late, sometimes far late into the night, if not 24 up to 36 hours, depending on the incident. So I think that kind of answers that. So.
Thanks, Ken. All right, the next question that we have is, can you define deployed to field? Example, if you're a dispatcher on a resource order out of state, is that considered the field?
Yeah, that's, again, like I said, this premium pay, we've been tossing around a ton of questions on this one ourselves. I think as, we see that these start moving along, some of those details probably got to get worked out, because there's a ton of questions. What happens to the folks in the home unit if you're on severity, and what happens? Yeah, so there's a ton of questions on that. So I think, what does in the field mean? I think all that's got to be worked out yet.
I will say, Ken, that I think, we've seen the precise language pretty recently ourselves, yeah. But I think many of us have kicked around the idea that if you're away from home, this should apply to you, right? If you're away from home on a prescribed fire, if you're away from home on a severity assignment, if you're away from home on a suppression assignment, even if you're staying in a hotel, working in a dispatch center, you're away from home, and that feels like the thing that's supposed to be compensated. So going forward, we'll need to do implementation guidance, as will the department. And again, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves because the language we know is still being kicked back and forth. And for all we know, something entirely different could come back from OMB. That's why we're not hanging our hats on the stuff that is out on grassroots fire, for instance. But we're just giving you what we know from what we've seen so far. But personally, you're away from home, you're away from home. This seems like it should be compensating you the same way for whatever that assignment looks like. But there you go. That's just one person's opinion, but we'll be making an argument, something like that. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Grant. All right. The next question we have is, so if someone works the extra 200 hours of overtime to meet what they were getting for the supplemental pay, how is this addressing work-life issues? Giving people the bump, individuals got used to that. And now it will drop. And that's going to impact the lower GS levels, especially. So I think maybe more of a comment, unless there's something that someone might have.
I guess I'll comment, so the people we're talking about getting the bulk of the pay bump, GS3s through 9s, and well, it'll be 10s probably at this point for crew soups. The expectation for those jobs is that you respond to fires. So that's part of the job. So I think nobody presumes that you'll be working as a firefighter 40 hours a week and not more than 40 hours a week. There'll be some overtime, even if you're a home unit, there'll be overtime involved, because that's why we exist as a program to respond to fires, and fires don't obey 9 to 5. So, I mean, I think there's a clear-eyed recognition that is part of the job, and you can't do it 40 hours a week. And that's why this whole thing exists, right? To compensate people better so they don't have to take assignment after assignment after assignment to make ends meet. They could take fewer, take more breaks. But there is also the assumption to still, as one of those GS, especially 1s through 10s, who for the most part are arduous firefighters, you're still going to be working more than 40 hours a week.
Thanks, Grant. So the next question we have, does a 25% in base pay make our pay match the risk profile of this job?
Yeah, good question. You know, that's a big part of why a lot of this is occurring, and what we're doing, or what's happening, is to try to push higher pay, because it's understood, the jobs that firefighters do puts firefighters in a lot more risk. And does it equate to 25%? Does it match? Good questions. I think there's a lot of effort to at least show that and try to bump things up higher. Whether it equates to the work being done, I guess that's a good question, but at least this is a good effort to move towards that.
Thanks. And then the next question, brings in the fact that it seems like this might be incentivizing working more overtime, and that doesn't really seem to help as much with the work-life balance discussion that we've been having throughout the Bureau. So, it's not really a full question, it's more of a, people are just concerned because it means that they're still going to be spending a lot of time away from family. So just wanted to acknowledge that one. So the next question is, so for the proposed special pay rate and how it's calculated, is that assuming that all of those overtime hours are on incidents? What about for districts that have high IA loads that don't meet the criteria for the portal to portal?
I think, Ken, maybe we're going to say the same thing, but if you have high IA, you're still getting paid overtime, actually more than the portal to portal for those times you're fighting fire. So if we just think of it 36 hours, first 36 hours, that nothing's changing there under the way we understand it. It's still overtime after your base. It's when you kind of transition to extended attack, then portal to portal will, how we understand it, would take effect. So I don't feel like it's penalizing those people who aren't on, large fires or extended attack fires. If you have high fire load, IA fire load that goes beyond your normal shift, that's overtime still being paid at 1.5 times as opposed to just half rate. So
All right, thanks, Ben. So this one is kind of going back to, you know, what wasn't the original intent of the supplemental pay to give towards fire employees so they didn't have to go out on fire assignments. So there's a little bit of confusion because there's a lot of explanations that include overtime. So I think, you know, that's, if anyone has something that you'd like to say to add into that, it's one of the questions that did come up. I know that might be a little bit outside of our ability.
oh, Grant's gonna go.
You're gonna say the same thing you just did, Ben, but portal to portal is tied to leaving home, right? But the overtime rates that Ben and Ken talked about apply at your home unit working overtime as well, right? So there's no magic overtime when you leave the unit. What's magic about leaving your unit is the portal to portal piece of it. And Ben, you could probably say that better than I did, but go ahead.
No, I mean, the way I look at it is you were going on fires last year, you're going to go on fires this year. Your base rate's going to be higher. I mean, I guess it goes back to Grant's point of, you know, we're still responding to fires. I don't think we're going to get out of the situation as firefighters and not go on fires. So, you know, I think the intent is that the compensation is increased for those fires that you do go on. Is it the same as the bill? No, but is it a great increase? Yeah, in my opinion.
Thank you. And then the last thing was kind of just more of a general comment. It looks like that people are feeling like they're still going to be paycheck to paycheck during the shoulder season. And this seems like it's still encouraging to be on the road for the entire summer to be able to make a career out of this. So that I think kind of ties back into what might have already talked about with some of the other questions, comments, unless anyone has something that you have.
I do, Morgan, and I guess we'll go back to what we've been trying outside before the bill even was transform the workforce, which is take what's been a largely temporary seasonal job and make it into more of a career seasonal or PFT job. And so we've great strides doing that. Also in that 24 budget is the opportunity to do more of that so that with this pay supplement on top of it, you'd be guaranteed longer season with a higher base pay rate so that you could spread out your work hours across a longer season, including the shoulder season, and spend less time on the road during the heart of the fire season if indeed you want to do that and your job supports it, right? So that is the overarching workforce transformation that we're working on separate from the pay supplement, which is let's get more people benefits, let's get more people longer tours if indeed they want it, give them more meaningful work, more of a year-round occupation, and take the pressure off trying to do this massive 1,200 hour, 1,300 hour sprint during the summer for folks who don't want to do that lifestyle doesn't work for them, right? I mean, obviously there are going to be folks of all stripes, and some folks want to be on the road and want to fight fire constantly, and then many of us don't. And so we're trying to make room for all sorts of folks, but that's the idea. Longer tours, more stability, better progression up the chain, and then stop this seasonal thing where people gotta just go hard and never stop. So that's the thought. Are there going to be hiccups along the way? Definitely. And as we see, there is an overtime element to this. I'll just say we didn't design this from the ground up. We've had a little bit of opinion to offer our own views of the world, but a lot of this has been happening at a pretty high level. So we are trying to influence where we can, and it's great for us actually to hear the concerns from everybody on the screen today, because we can definitely reflect that back to folks as we get a chance to offer opinions on what still is in flux out there. And just to the comment that there's a reverse incentive at work here, right? So the higher you go, the less, theoretically, the less of an increase you make, and that is absolutely so. And I'll say that's ever been so too, right? I mean, we were trying to encourage people to become an FMO, for instance. It's like, well, what do you get to do as an FMO? You get to do budget and a lot of hiring stuff and personnel actions, and you never get to go off on fires, or not very much. So I think that's always been there, and it's tough to encourage people to go do management jobs when they're they don't look as good sometimes. On the other flip side, you also, an management job, get to stay home more, right? So there is the incentive to if work-life balance can also go with some of those jobs at the upper pay grades, where the push to travel all the time isn't there as much. So hopefully we can preserve some incentive for people to stick with us and go up to the GS 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 levels, because we really need it. And that's the thought behind all this, is keep people in the workforce, keep people in fire, and have them stick with us and move into management, take their fire experience and move into management and stick with us as a career. That's really the ultimate goal. So hopefully that works. But yes, it looks like a reverse incentive. So hopefully we can figure out that one as well. Morgan, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Grant. So it seems like we tried to hit all the questions that we got in through the chat. And just want to say thank you so much to Cindy, Ben, and Ken for your ability to hop on today and share the information that you do have for updates. And I wanted to thank everyone who sent in questions. I do know that there were people who weren't able to make it on this call, and we're going to get the recording out as soon as possible. So huge thank you again, and thank you, Grant, for participating and being able to assist today as well. So before you go, I just want to let you know what the next Fire Chat Fridays are. On Friday, May 19th at 12 p.m. Mountain Time, there's going to be a Wildland Fire community preparedness conversation. It's going to be a peer-to-peer discussion on it'll be a peer-to-peer discussion, and it'll be led by Dr. Patty, and you'll hear from fire support and personnel staff on various topics, including mental health, work-life balance, physical fitness, sleep, nutrition, crew cohesion support, and administrative preparedness. And then Friday, June 9th at 12 p.m. Mountain Time, it'll be a conversation on serious accident investigations and critical incident stress management programs. I'll send out, either Jennifer or I will be sending out the Fire Chat Friday save the date, so you'll have that. And I just wanted to thank you all for being here. And Jennifer will be facilitating next month. So it's been great to assist with these over the last couple of weeks of my detail. So thank you all for joining today, and we'll close out. So thanks.